I am Melissa Parker, 34 years old, and I never thought my own parents would betray me. Last Sunday, during what started as a normal family dinner, my father glared at me and said, "Leave your keys and get out. This house belongs to the family now." My mother sat beside him, nodding in silent agreement. After years of letting them take advantage of my success, I simply placed the keys on the table and walked out quietly. Little did they know, I already had a plan. If you enjoy stories about standing up to family manipulation, hit that like button. Subscribe to my channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Seattle, where appearances meant everything to my parents, Thomas and Barbara Parker. Our house was modest, but always immaculately maintained for the neighbors to see. My father worked as a bank manager, and my mother was an administrative assistant at a local high school. On the surface, we looked like the perfect American family, but behind closed doors, there was always tension about money. From an early age, I noticed how my parents seemed perpetually dissatisfied with what they had. Dad would complain about his colleagues' vacations or new cars, while Mom would clip coupons obsessively while simultaneously ordering things we couldn't afford. They fought about finances constantly, yet somehow, it was never their fault they couldn't keep up with the Joneses. When I was 12, I started noticing the first signs of their manipulative behavior. My birthday money from grandparents would mysteriously need to be put away for college, yet somehow was never there when I asked about it later. When I questioned this, my mother would tear up and ask how I could accuse her of stealing from her own daughter. My father would become defensive, asking if I thought they weren't good parents. I quickly learned to stop asking. By 16, I was working part-time at a local coffee shop, saving every penny in an account they couldn't access. My parents seemed proud of my work ethic, but I frequently heard comments like, "Melissa is so good with money, she can help us out when she's successful." I didn't realize then how prophetic those words would be. I excelled academically and earned a partial scholarship to the University of Washington. Not wanting to rely on my parents or drown in student loans, I worked 3 part-time jobs throughout college. While my classmates partied, I served coffee in the mornings, tutored in the afternoons, and waited tables on weekends. My parents told relatives how proud they were of my independence, but never offered help despite knowing how hard I was working. After graduating with a business degree, I landed an entry-level position at a prestigious real estate firm in Seattle. My starting salary wasn't impressive, but I was determined to learn everything about the industry. I rented a tiny studio apartment and continued living frugally, investing what I could in additional real estate courses and networking events. When I closed my first major commercial deal at 25, my commission was substantial. I called my parents, excited to share my success. Their initial reaction seemed genuinely proud, but within minutes, the conversation shifted to their broken furnace and how they were just going to have to suffer through the winter unless someone could help them. I ended up paying for their new $6,000 heating system, telling myself it was a one-time thing to help my parents. It wasn't. Over the next year, their car broke down, I helped with repairs. Their roof leaked, I covered half the cost, and their property taxes increased, I loaned them the difference. Each request came wrapped in guilt, family obligation, and promises to pay me back that never materialized. Meanwhile, my career continued to flourish. I developed a reputation for finding undervalued properties and negotiating skillfully. By 26, I had saved enough for a down payment on my first investment property, a small fixer-upper condo that I renovated on weekends and eventually sold for a healthy profit. My parents attended the housewarming party for that first investment property, and I still remember my father's words as he raised his glass to Melissa, who always remembers where she came from. Family takes care of family. At the time, I felt proud that I could help them. I didn't recognize it as the beginning of a pattern that would define our relationship for years to come. By my late 20s, I had built a respectable portfolio of smaller properties and had moved up to senior real estate consultant at my firm. My parents' financial requests had become more frequent and more substantial. They needed new appliances, Their friends were all taking cruises, and they felt left out. Dad wanted to retire early but needed help supplementing his pension. Each time I tried to discuss budgeting or financial planning with them, they would shut down the conversation. "We're too old to change our ways," my mother would say, while my father would remind me that they had sacrificed everything to raise me. The emotional manipulation was effective. And I continued to help them, even as a small voice inside wondered when enough would be enough. What I didn't realize then was that they weren't just taking advantage of my financial success, they were coming to expect it as their right. The foundation was being laid for a confrontation that would eventually shatter our family forever. At 30, after years of hard work and careful investing, I found myself in a position to purchase my dream home. It was a beautiful craftsman-style house in one of Seattle's most desirable neighborhoods with 4 bedrooms, a home office, and a stunning view of the Puget Sound. The asking price was $1.2 million, a stretch even with my success, but the real estate market was booming, and I knew the property would appreciate significantly. After careful consideration of my finances, I negotiated with the mortgage company for favorable terms, putting down 30% and securing a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. The monthly payments would be substantial, but well within my budget given my income and investment returns. I still remember the day I signed the final papers, my hand trembling slightly as I wrote the largest check I'd ever written for the down payment. This house represented everything I'd worked for: security, success, and a place to build my future. Around the same time, my parents were facing challenges of their own. My father had developed some health issues that limited his ability to maintain their home, and their fixed retirement income was proving insufficient for Seattle's rising cost of living. During one of our weekly dinners, my mother tearfully mentioned they were considering selling their house and moving to a smaller apartment. Looking back, I should have recognized the calculated nature of that conversation. My parents knew exactly how to appeal to my sense of family obligation. By the end of dinner, I had suggested what seemed like the perfect solution. They could sell their house, use the proceeds for their retirement fund, and come live with me in my new spacious home. There would be plenty of room for all of us, and they could help with utilities and maintenance costs. "That's so generous of you, honey," my mother had said, dabbing at her eyes. "We raised such a thoughtful daughter." My father nodded solemnly. "We'd insist on contributing, of course. We wouldn't want to be a burden." We agreed on what I thought were clear terms. They would pay $800 monthly toward utilities and maintenance, help with household chores since I worked long hours, and respect that this was primarily my space. We even shook hands on it, which seemed unnecessary for family, but gave me a sense of security about the arrangement. The first few months were surprisingly harmonious. My parents seemed genuinely grateful for the beautiful space, and my mother took pride in maintaining the home while I was at work. My father, despite his health limitations, tended to the garden with enthusiasm. We ate dinner together most nights, and I enjoyed having family around after years of living alone. For a brief period, I believed we had found the perfect arrangement. The shift happened so gradually that I almost didn't notice it. It started with small things: my mother rearranging my kitchen without asking, my father changing the thermostat settings constantly. When I gently mentioned these issues, they seemed hurt and defensive. "We're just trying to make this place more livable," my mother said. "Don't you want us to feel at home here?" For months in, they hosted a large family gathering without consulting me first. I came home from a business trip to find 20 relatives in my living room, some of whom I barely knew. When I pulled my mother aside to express my surprise, she seemed genuinely confused. "But this is our family home now," she said. "We didn't think we needed permission to invite family over." That phrase, "our family home," should have been my first major warning sign. Soon after, they began making decisions about the property without consulting me. My father hired landscapers to remove a Japanese maple I loved, explaining that it was blocking the view. My mother replaced my modern furniture with antique pieces from storage, insisting they suited the house better. When I objected, they made me feel unreasonable and controlling. Around the 6-month mark, my parents stopped making their monthly contributions entirely. When I brought it up, My father explained that they had unexpected medical expenses that month and would double up next month. Next month never came. Instead, there were always new reasons. They had lent money to my cousin, property taxes on their old house had been miscalculated, their investments had underperformed. Rather than create conflict, I began covering all expenses myself. The financial burden wasn't crippling given my income, but the principle bothered me deeply. We had an agreement. Yet they seemed to feel entitled to disregard it completely. Still, I told myself they were family, and family supports each other. For 2 years, this pattern continued. I paid the mortgage, utilities, maintenance, and even funded most of our shared groceries and household supplies. Meanwhile, my parents lived rent-free in a luxury home, while seemingly forgetting who actually owned it. The balance of power in our relationship had shifted dramatically, though I wouldn't fully understand how much until it was too late. The first time I heard my father refer to my house as the family home to an outsider, I was unpacking groceries in the kitchen while he chatted with a neighbor on the front porch. We decided to downsize from our old place and move into the family home here, he explained, as if the property belonged to all of us collectively. I brushed it off as casual phrasing, not wanting to make an issue of semantics. But similar comments continued. During a phone call with her sister, my mother mentioned, "We're so happy with our house. And the investment in this neighborhood was such a good decision." Small linguistic shifts that revealed their changing perception of ownership. One evening, I attempted to address these comments directly. We were having dinner on the back deck, enjoying the summer evening when I brought it up as gently as possible. "I've noticed you both refer to this as our house when talking to people," I said. "I'm glad you feel at home here, but it might be good to be clear about our arrangement. Especially with family." My father put down his fork with a clatter. "Are you embarrassed that your aging parents live with you? Would you prefer we tell everyone we're just your tenants?" "That's not what I meant at all," I said, startled by his reaction. "I just think, after everything we've done for you," my mother interjected, tears already forming. "We gave up our home to move in here, and now you want to clarify that we're not really family." Their response left me bewildered and defensive. Somehow, my reasonable concern had been twisted into an attack on them. This pattern repeated whenever I tried to establish boundaries or clarify expectations. They would respond with emotional outbursts, accusations of ingratitude, or cold silence that could last for days. Over time, I found myself avoiding difficult conversations altogether, retreating to my home office when tensions rose. The situation escalated when I discovered they had been intercepting my mail. One afternoon, needing a document for work, I asked my mother if she had seen the day's mail delivery. She seemed oddly evasive before claiming nothing had arrived. Later that evening, I found a stack of mail hidden beneath newspapers in the recycling bin, including an opened mortgage statement addressed to me. When confronted, my father claimed they were helping organize my paperwork. I might have believed this explanation if not for the fact that certain pieces, specifically financial documents related to the house, were missing entirely. Increasingly concerned, I contacted Lauren, a law school friend who specialized in property law. Over coffee away from the house, I explained the situation. "This sounds like more than just family tension, Melissa," Lauren said after listening intently. "They're actively creating a narrative of co-ownership. The mail tampering is particularly concerning. That's actually illegal." Lauren advised me to secure my important documents, maintain clear records of all house-related transactions, and consider having a formal written agreement about our living arrangement. "Family or not, you need to protect yourself," she warned. Taking her advice, I installed a small safe in my bedroom closet for important papers and began having sensitive mail sent to my office. I also attempted to establish clearer boundaries, creating a shared calendar for house guests and requesting advance notice for family gatherings. My parents responded by ignoring these boundaries completely. They changed the entry code to the home security system without telling me, forcing me to ring the doorbell of my own house one evening after work. When I expressed frustration, my mother seemed genuinely confused. "But we didn't think you'd mind," she said. "This is a family house." That phrase again, family house, spoken with such conviction that I almost doubted myself. The situation with extended family became increasingly uncomfortable. At gatherings, relatives would thank my parents for their hospitality or compliment them on their beautiful home. When I gently corrected a cousin once, my father pulled me aside immediately. "Why would you embarrass us like that?" he hissed. "Family doesn't need to know our financial arrangements." I later discovered my parents had been sharing a very different version of our living situation with relatives. According to them, they had helped me purchase the house with proceeds from their property sale, and we were co-owners. This explained why family members increasingly treated me as if I should be grateful to my parents for our living arrangement, rather than the other way around. The emotional toll became overwhelming. I felt like a stranger in my own home, walking on eggshells and retreating to my bedroom or office for peace. Friends noticed my withdrawal and diminished spirits, but I found it difficult to explain the situation without sounding petty or ungrateful. After all, wasn't I financially successful? Wasn't I blessed to have living parents who wanted to be part of my life? Shouldn't I be able to handle this? The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday when I came home early with a migraine. Entering quietly through the garage, I overheard my parents in the living room with people whose voices I didn't recognize. "And this will be your room when you move in," my mother was saying. "Melissa is hardly ever here anyway with her work schedule." I stepped into the doorway to find my parents giving a house tour to my aunt and uncle from Portland, who apparently were planning to move in for a few months while looking for property in Seattle. More shocking than this revelation was what I spotted on my uncle's keyring as he gesticulated, a fresh copy of my house key. When our eyes met, there was a moment of awkward recognition before my father quickly ushered them toward the kitchen, making excuses about needing to check on something. Later that evening, I discovered that my parents had distributed copies of my house keys to at least 5 different relatives, all without my knowledge or consent. My home was no longer my own, and I finally understood that the situation couldn't be resolved through better communication or clearer boundaries. Something fundamental had broken in my relationship with my parents, and I needed to take decisive action. That night, after discovering the unauthorized key distribution, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my window seat overlooking the Seattle skyline, the house quiet except for the distant sound of my father's snoring. The beautiful home I had worked so hard for no longer felt like a sanctuary but a battleground. I realized with crushing clarity that no amount of discussion or boundary setting would change my parents' behavior. They truly believed they were entitled to my home, and they had methodically worked to establish that narrative with our entire family. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider the previously unthinkable. I needed to remove my parents from my home and possibly from my life, at least temporarily. The thought filled me with both dread and unexpected relief. I had been carrying the weight of their expectations and manipulation for so long that the possibility of freedom felt almost foreign. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and drove to a small cafe across town where I was unlikely to run into anyone I knew. There, I made 3 critical phone calls. The first was to Diana, my financial advisor, requesting an emergency meeting that afternoon. The second was to Michael Greenway, a real estate attorney I had worked with on several investment properties. The third was to my boss, explaining that I might need to consider a temporary relocation for personal reasons, and asking about remote work possibilities. Diana's office was on the 42nd floor of a downtown high-rise with views of Puget Sound. She listened without interruption as I explained the situation with my parents, occasionally jotting notes, but mostly maintaining steady eye contact that helped calm my racing thoughts. "Financially speaking, you have options," she said when I finished. "Your investment portfolio is strong enough to support a significant move if necessary. The question is what you want your next step to be." We spent 2 hours reviewing my finances, running various scenarios. It was during this conversation that Diana mentioned an opportunity that seemed almost too perfectly timed. One of my clients is launching a major development project in Austin. They're looking for someone with your expertise in luxury real estate consulting. The position would mean relocating, but the compensation package is substantial. I could make an introduction if you're interested. I had visited Austin once for a conference and had been impressed by its vibrant atmosphere and growing real estate market. The possibility of a fresh start in a new city suddenly seemed like more than just an escape. It could be a positive step forward. My meeting with Michael Greenway later that day provided clarity on the legal aspects of my situation. After reviewing my mortgage documents and the absence of any written agreement with my parents, he confirmed what I already suspected. Legally, they have no claim to your property, he explained. However, removing them could be complicated since they've established residency. If they refuse to leave voluntarily, you'd be looking at a formal eviction process, which can be both time-consuming and emotionally taxing. When I mentioned the possibility of selling the house instead, Michael's expression shifted from concern to interest. That actually simplifies things considerably, he said. As the sole owner, you have every right to sell the property. They would have no legal grounds to prevent the sale, though they could certainly make the process unpleasant. Over the next week, while maintaining a facade of normalcy at home, I secretly set my plan in motion. I contacted a trusted real estate colleague about listing my house, specifying that we would need to move quickly and discreetly. The Seattle market was hot, and we estimated the property could sell for around $1.7 million, a significant return on my investment. I also followed up on the Austin opportunity, scheduling video interviews and discussing relocation terms. The company was eager to have someone with Seattle market expertise as they developed luxury properties aimed at West Coast transplants. The salary offered was even higher than my current earnings, and they included a generous relocation package. During this time, I refinanced my mortgage, ostensibly to take advantage of lower interest rates, but actually to ensure there was absolutely no paperwork that could be misconstrued as giving my parents any claim to the property. The refinancing also allowed me to access some of my equity, which I transferred to accounts my parents couldn't access. I formed an LLC in Delaware to purchase my next property, adding another layer of privacy protection. Through this entity, I made an offer on a modern 3-bedroom home in a gated community in Austin's Northwest Hills. The property was private, secure, and completely disconnected from my parents or anyone who knew them. The emotional toll of these secretive preparations was immense. I felt constant anxiety about my parents discovering my plans before everything was in place. Each night at dinner, making small talk while harboring such significant secrets felt like an acting performance. I lost weight, had trouble sleeping, and jumped whenever my phone rang. What made it bearable was knowing I was taking back control of my life. Each step completed in my plan felt like removing another link in the chains of manipulation and guilt that had bound me to my parents for so long. 2 weeks into my preparations, I began the delicate process of moving essential belongings out of the house without raising suspicion. I took a small suitcase for a business trip that actually contained irreplaceable items, family heirlooms from my grandparents, important documents, and sentimental possessions I couldn't bear to lose if things went badly. These went into a storage unit I rented under my LLC's name. Each day, I would take a few more items, claiming to be donating old clothes or reorganizing my office, until everything truly important to me was safely removed from the house. My parents, comfortable in their belief that they had established dominance over the household, never questioned these activities. By the end of the month, I had secured the Austin position, received a promising offer on my Seattle home, pending final negotiations, and closed on the Austin property. All financial transactions were carefully structured to keep them private until I was ready for the confrontation I knew was coming. The final piece fell into place when my real estate colleague found a motivated buyer willing to close quickly and discreetly on my Seattle home. The offer came in at $1.72 million, even higher than we had hoped. With my mortgage balance at approximately $780,000, I stood to walk away with nearly $1 million after closing costs. All that remained was to inform my parents. I decided to do it during our regular Sunday family dinner, knowing they would be least expecting a confrontation in what had become a ritualized family gathering. I made arrangements to stay at a hotel afterward, with my essential documents and a suitcase already in my car trunk. The night before the confrontation, I sat alone in my home office, looking at old family photos and wondering how we had reached this point. Despite everything, part of me still loved my parents and wished things could be different. But I had finally accepted that their love was conditional, based on what I could provide for them rather than who I was. That realization, painful as it was, gave me the strength for what I needed to do next. Sunday arrived with an unusual brightness for Seattle in autumn. I spent the morning finalizing details for my departure, confirming my hotel reservation, and touching base with my attorney. Around noon, I heard my parents bustling in the kitchen, preparing for our regular family dinner. The familiar sounds, my mother humming as she chopped vegetables, my father's commentary on whatever sports game was playing, struck me with unexpected sadness. This would be our last Sunday together in this house. What I didn't expect was the doorbell ringing at 3 o'clock, followed by the voices of multiple family members. Stepping out of my office, I was stunned to find not just my parents, but a gathering of extended family members, my father's brother and his wife, 2 cousins and their spouses, and even my mother's sister who lived in Portland. They were arranging platters of food and setting up extra chairs, as if this were a planned family reunion rather than our usual Sunday dinner. "There she is," my father announced as I appeared, with a heartiness that seemed forced. "The busy career woman finally emerges." My mother hurried over, spatula in hand. "Surprise. I thought it would be nice to have everyone together today. It's been too long since we've had a proper family gathering." The calculated nature of this surprise became immediately apparent. My Aunt Clara hugged me and whispered, "So generous of you to open your family home like this." My cousin Jessica commented on how your parents have made this place so cozy, while her husband asked my father about those landscaping plans you mentioned for the backyard. They had orchestrated this gathering deliberately, I realized with a sinking feeling. Having the extended family present was meant to make any confrontation on my part more difficult. It was a power play and a well-executed one. Throughout the meal, I noticed subtle exchanges between my parents, knowing glances and slight nods. The conversation repeatedly centered around family legacy, the importance of keeping property in the family, and how younger generations don't understand the value of family roots. Each comment seemed targeted, though delivered with smiles and casual tones. After dessert was served, my father cleared his throat and tapped his water glass with a spoon. The table fell silent as all eyes turned to him. "We wanted to gather everyone today because we have an announcement to make," he said, his voice carrying an authority I remembered from childhood. "As most of you know, Barbara and I have been thinking about our legacy and what we want to leave for our family." My mother reached for his hand, both of them now looking at me with expressions that mixed challenge with false benevolence. "Melissa has generously allowed us to live here these past few years," he continued, "but we've decided it's time to formalize what we all already know. This house belongs to the Parker family as a whole, not just to one individual." The room remained quiet, but I could feel the weight of everyone's attention shifting between my father and me. My cousin's husband looked uncomfortable, staring at his plate, while my aunts nodded in apparent agreement with my father's words. "We've spoken to an attorney," my mother added, her voice gentle but firm. "And we're establishing a family trust that will ensure this home remains available for generations of Parkers to come." My father reached into his pocket and produced a folded document, which he placed on the table with theatrical precision. "We've already begun the paperwork. All we need now is for you to transfer the deed, Melissa." The room seemed to close in around me as I realized the full extent of their plan. They hadn't just been manipulating me, they had been constructing an elaborate narrative for our entire family, positioning themselves as the reasonable elder generation while casting me as the selfish daughter who needed to be guided toward proper family values. And to make things official, my father continued, his voice hardening slightly, "We'll need your house keys, Melissa. The family will be taking over management of the property effective immediately." My mother nodded, adding, "It's for the best, dear. You're so busy with work, you hardly have time to appreciate this beautiful home anyway." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room was on me. waiting for my response. In that moment, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The anxiety and conflict that had been building for months suddenly crystallized into perfect clarity. These people, my own parents, were attempting to steal my home through emotional manipulation and family pressure. I looked directly at my father, then my mother, maintaining eye contact as I reached into my pocket. Without breaking that gaze, I placed my house keys on the table between us. "I understand," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "If that's what you've decided, I won't argue." The surprise on their faces was evident. They had clearly expected resistance, tears, or anger. My calm acceptance seemed to momentarily confuse them. "Well," my father recovered quickly, "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. It really is best for everyone." I stood up slowly, smoothing my napkin as I placed it beside my plate. "I should go pack some things." "No need to rush," my mother said, her voice tinged with uncertainty at my compliance. "We weren't suggesting you leave immediately." Actually, my father contradicted her, perhaps sensing vulnerability in my acquiescence. A clean break might be best. "Leave your keys and get out. This house belongs to the family now." I nodded once, looking around the table at the mixed expressions of my extended family: discomfort, confusion, and, in some cases, the smug satisfaction of those who believed they would now have access to a property they had contributed nothing toward. Without another word, I walked to the entryway, collected my purse and the light jacket I had deliberately left there earlier, and walked out the front door of my own home. No one followed me or called out as I got into my car and drove away. The tears didn't start until I was halfway to the hotel. They weren't tears of sadness, but of relief mixed with anger. Relief that I had escaped the toxic environment without breaking down. And anger at the years of manipulation I had endured. By the time I checked into my hotel room, the emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a steely determination. I ordered room service, opened my laptop, and sent a pre-drafted email to my attorney, formally authorizing him to proceed with the house sale. Then I called the mortgage company to confirm the processing of the refinancing paperwork and sale approval. Everything was on track for the transaction to complete within days. The buyers are still eager to close quickly, my real estate colleague confirmed when I called her next. They've waived inspections and are ready with financing. We could close by Wednesday. As I prepared for bed in the anonymous comfort of the hotel room, my phone lit up with notifications, text messages and voicemails from my parents, alternating between demands to know where I was and attempts at guilt-inducing concern. I silenced the phone without reading or listening to any of them. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for tonight, I had taken the first step toward freedom. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized I felt lighter than I had in years, unburdened by the weight of impossible expectations and manipulative love. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar hotel curtains and the momentary disorientation of not being in my own bed. As reality rushed back, I checked my phone to find 27 missed calls and numerous text messages. Most were from my parents, but several came from other family members, their tones ranging from concerned to accusatory. I ignored them all and instead called Michael Greenway. "Everything's proceeding as planned," he assured me. "The mortgage company will be contacting the property owners of record today about the sale." The property owners of record being me, I clarified, still needing to hear it confirmed. "Exactly. Just you. Regardless of what your parents might have told family members, legally the house is yours alone to sell." Around 10 o'clock, while I was on a video call with my new employers in Austin discussing transition plans, my phone began ringing incessantly. I had silenced notifications from my parents, so I knew it must be the mortgage company. When I finally answered between meetings, the representative confirmed that they had spoken with some very confused and agitated people at the property address. Mr. Parker became quite belligerent when informed of the pending sale and transfer of funds, she explained with professional detachment. "We had to clarify that he has no legal standing to contest the transaction and that the current residents would need to vacate the property within 30 days of closing, per the terms agreed upon with the buyers." I thanked her for the update, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Part of me had still harbored a faint hope that when confronted with reality, my parents might recognize the gravity of their actions and take responsibility. That hope was fading quickly. By early afternoon, my father's number appeared on my phone for what seemed like the 100th time. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He demanded without preamble, his voice shaking with rage. "The mortgage company says you're selling our house." "I'm selling my house," I corrected calmly. "The house that I purchased. That I've paid the mortgage on, and that is solely in my name." "We had an agreement," he shouted. "We're family. You can't just throw your parents out on the street." "What agreement, Dad?" "The one where you would contribute to expenses but never did? The one where you would respect that it was my home but instead gave out keys to relatives without my knowledge? Or perhaps you mean the agreement you invented about the house belonging to the family, which never existed except in your mind." His tone shifted abruptly from anger to pleading. "Melissa, honey, there's been a misunderstanding. We never meant to suggest we were taking your house. We just want what's best for everyone. Including announcing to our entire family that you were establishing a trust and taking over management of my property? Was that a misunderstanding too?" In the background, I could hear my mother crying and relatives talking in agitated voices. My father lowered his voice. "Look, we can work this out. Just call off the sale. And we'll sit down like adults and figure out a better arrangement." "The sale is happening," I stated firmly. "The house will transfer to its new owners next week. You have 30 days from closing to find a new place to live. You can't do this." His anger returned, louder than before. "Where are we supposed to go?" "We sold our house to help you." "You sold your house and kept the proceeds for yourselves," I corrected. "You've lived rent-free in a luxury home for years while I covered every expense. I suggest you use those proceeds to secure new housing." After I hung up, the calls from other family members began. My Aunt Clara accused me of being heartless. "How could you do this to your own parents after all they've done for you?" My cousin Jessica suggested I was having some sort of breakdown and needed professional help. My Uncle Robert, normally the family peacemaker, asked if we couldn't find a compromise before things go too far. None of them, I noticed, seemed to question my parents' version of events or consider that there might be another side to the story. The narrative they had constructed over years had taken firm root. My mother's calls were the hardest to ignore. Her voicemails started angry, but quickly devolved into tearful pleas. "We're your family, your blood," she sobbed in one message. "Families don't do this to each other. Please, Melissa, don't destroy our family over a misunderstanding." 3 days after the confrontation, as I worked remotely from my hotel room, my real estate colleague called with news that the buyers had accelerated their offer and were ready to close immediately. "They've transferred the funds to escrow," she explained. "We can complete the paperwork tomorrow if you're available." That evening, I received an unexpected email from my cousin Jessica's husband, Tom. Unlike the rest of the family, his message was measured and thoughtful. "I wasn't comfortable with what happened at dinner," he wrote. "While I don't know all the details of your arrangement with your parents, something felt off about the whole situation. Just wanted to say that not everyone in the family is against you, even if it might seem that way right now." It was a small gesture, but it meant more than he could know, a crack in the unified front of family judgment that had been presented to me. The following day, I signed the final paperwork transferring ownership of my Seattle home to its new owners. The proceeds, just over $940,000 after paying off the mortgage and covering closing costs, were transferred to my account. I forwarded the official notice of sale to my parents along with a formal letter from my attorney reiterating the 30-day vacancy requirement. Their response was a desperate legal maneuver. My father apparently consulted an attorney of his own, who filed an emergency petition claiming they had an implied ownership interest in the property based on their contributions and length of residence. Michael Greenway called it a Hail Mary with no legal merit and assured me it would be quickly dismissed. He was right. The judge reviewed the documentation of the home purchase, mortgage payments, and lack of any written agreement regarding shared ownership, then denied the petition within days. The ruling was unambiguous. the house had been legally sold by its sole owner, and the current occupants had no claim to the property. This legal defeat seemed to trigger an implosion within my extended family. According to Tom, who continued to provide occasional updates, my parents' narrative began to unravel as family members questioned why they hadn't prepared for this possibility or saved any of the proceeds from their own home sale. My father's brother, initially one of their strongest supporters, became increasingly frustrated upon learning they had contributed nothing financially to the household despite their claims of co-ownership. Your Aunt Clara asked them point-blank where all the money went from selling their house, Tom reported. Apparently, there was a very uncomfortable silence, followed by a lot of vague explanations about investments and medical expenses. People are starting to see the pattern. 2 weeks after the sale, I boarded a plane to Austin, having shipped my remaining belongings ahead. As the aircraft lifted off from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, I felt both grief and liberation. I was leaving behind not just a city, but a version of myself, the dutiful daughter who had allowed guilt and manipulation to override her own well-being. My parents finally moved out of the house 3 days before the deadline, relocating to a small apartment near my uncle's home. They continued to call and email, their messages evolving from anger to bargaining to a strange blend of apology and justification. "We only wanted what was best for the family," my mother wrote. "We may have overstepped, but our intentions were good." I maintained limited contact, responding only to practical questions and ignoring the emotional manipulation. It was a boundary I should have established years earlier. My first weeks in Austin were a blur of new experiences, setting up my home, learning the geography of the city, and beginning my new position. The property I had purchased through my LLC was even more beautiful in person, with a private courtyard and stunning sunset views. More importantly, it was entirely mine, untainted by family expectations or manipulations. 6 months after leaving Seattle, I stood on my Austin home's back deck, watching the Texas sunset paint the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks. My new life had taken shape in ways both expected and surprising. The real estate market in Austin was booming, and my expertise in luxury properties had quickly established me as a valuable asset to my new company. Professionally, the move had been an unqualified success. The personal journey, however, had been more complicated. After the initial relief of escape faded, I found myself struggling with waves of guilt, anger, and grief. Despite everything they had done, these were still my parents. And the severing of that relationship, even if necessary, left a wound that needed proper healing. 2 months into my time in Austin, I began working with Dr. Lawson, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Our weekly sessions became a crucial part of my recovery process. "What you're experiencing is a form of grief," she explained during one session. "You're mourning not just the relationship you had with your parents, but the relationship you deserve to have, the one that never existed." Through therapy, I began to understand the patterns that had defined my family dynamic for decades. My parents' behavior hadn't started with the house situation. It was merely the culmination of lifelong tendencies toward emotional manipulation and entitlement. Dr. Lawson helped me recognize that their actions reflected their own unresolved issues rather than any failure on my part. "The hardest part for adult children of manipulative parents," she told me, "is accepting that you cannot change them. You can only change how you respond to them." This insight proved transformative. Instead of continuing to hope my parents would someday acknowledge their behavior and make amends, I focused on building boundaries that protected my well-being regardless of their choices. Meanwhile, I was slowly creating a new community in Austin. I joined a local hiking group, became involved with a real estate mentorship program for underprivileged youth, and made friends with neighbors and colleagues. Unlike the conditional relationships I had grown accustomed to in my family, these connections were based on mutual respect and genuine care. Rachel, a landscape architect who lived 2 doors down, became particularly important in my new life. After helping me design my courtyard garden, she began inviting me to dinner parties and community events. Through her, I met a diverse group of people who accepted me simply for who I was, not what I could provide. Family isn't always blood, Rachel told me one evening as we shared wine on my patio. Sometimes it's the people who want you in their lives because of who you are, not what you own or what you can do for them. This concept of chosen family was revolutionary to me. Growing up, I had been taught that blood relations trumped all other connections and that family obligation was the highest value. Now I was learning that healthy relationships, familial or otherwise, needed to be reciprocal and respectful to be sustainable. For months after my departure, my father suffered a minor heart attack. My mother called in tears, implying that the stress of my abandonment had contributed to his condition. My first instinct was to book an immediate flight to Seattle, drop everything, and rush to his side. The pattern of responding to crisis with self-sacrifice was deeply ingrained. Instead, I took a deep breath and called Dr. Lawson. After discussing the situation, I decided to send flowers and call my father directly once he was stabilized, but not to disrupt my life or return to Seattle. It was a small act of self-protection that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. When we spoke by phone, my father seemed subdued, almost humble. "The doctors say I need to reduce stress," he told me. "Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking." For the first time in our adult relationship, he acknowledged, albeit indirectly, that his actions regarding my house had been wrong. "We got carried away with ideas about family legacy," he admitted. "Perhaps we didn't go about things the right way." It wasn't a full apology or acceptance of responsibility, but it was a start. Over the following weeks, our conversations remained cautious, but less charged with manipulation and guilt. My mother eventually sent an email that came closest to a genuine acknowledgement. "I miss you," she wrote. "And I'm sorry things happened the way they did. We were wrong to try to take what wasn't ours. I can't promise we'll always get things right going forward, but I want to try to have some kind of relationship with my daughter again." With Dr. Lawson's guidance, I established clear, limited contact with my parents, monthly phone calls and occasional emails, but with explicit boundaries about acceptable topics and behaviors. I made it clear that any return to manipulative patterns would result in me stepping back from communication again. Think of it as training wheels for a new kind of relationship, Dr. Lawson suggested. They're learning that access to you is contingent on respecting your boundaries. By the one-year anniversary of my move to Austin, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. The professional gamble had paid off extraordinarily well. I had been promoted to director of luxury acquisitions and had successfully closed several major deals that enhanced my reputation in the industry. My personal growth was even more significant. I had learned to recognize and avoid manipulative dynamics in all relationships, not just with my parents. I had developed a chosen family of friends who supported my success rather than trying to claim it as their own. Most importantly, I had discovered that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. My experience with my parents and our family home had taught me painful but crucial lessons about love, ownership, and self-worth. True love doesn't try to possess or control. It respects and supports. Ownership isn't just about legal documents, but about acknowledging and honoring others' rights and boundaries. And self-worth cannot be determined by others' expectations or demands, only by our own values and choices. Today, as I look out at the Austin skyline from my peaceful home, I no longer feel the weight of family obligation that once threatened to crush me. The relationship with my parents continues to evolve, sometimes forward, sometimes back, but always within the boundaries I've established. We may never have the close bond that some families enjoy, but we have found a way to maintain connection without sacrificing my autonomy or well-being. The keys I left on that dining room table in Seattle represented more than just access to a physical space. They symbolized the release of a lifetime of trying to earn love through sacrifice and compliance. In letting go of those keys, I found the key to something far more valuable: the freedom to define family on my own terms and build a life based on mutual respect rather than obligation. If you've ever struggled with family boundaries or felt trapped by others' expectations, I hope my story reminds you that you have the right to protect yourself, even from those who are supposed to love you most. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to walk away from toxic situations and create something healthier. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect themselves from toxic family dynamics. Thank you for being part of my journey. And remember, true family supports your growth, not your surrender.